Alright, it says we are live, so hopefully we are live. Welcome everyone, this is Andres Restart. I am joined by my buddy Brandon. He's on camera for once. It's been a little bit, but there he is in the flesh. He does exist. He is not a computer. He is not an apparition. He is a real person.
That I
Maybe.
That you know of. I don't know.
That you know of, right?
Some kind of Unreal Engine 5 digital human.
Yeah, so we're going to just let people roll in for a little bit. We did start a little bit late today. To be totally frank with you, I've been a mess. You can see that, like, first of all, this whole set was supposed to be like a temporary set, and it turned out to be a longer set than I realized. So I haven't really situated it appropriately yet. I'm working on it, but you know, there's that. But then I also got off work like not that long ago, and I'm wearing these compression things because I totally wrecked both my arms yesterday playing ball. It hurts to do this. That feels fine. This, So like basically, I sprained my elbow. Probably. I'm kind of hoping it's just a sprain, or else I'll have to get
Right.
I've sprained my ankles before. Like really bad to the point where I needed like a walking stick for like a week. It's happened before.
Dang.
And
I think I sprained my ankle once. Either that or it was that I pulled my Achilles tendon. We didn't actually go to the doctor because it was too expensive, but I couldn't walk for like days.
Yeah, sometimes a sprain can be really bad, right? So like, yeah, like basically this is kind of how it looks, except it feels just like how I sprained my ankle that one time I couldn't walk for almost a week, except it's my elbow. So I'm hoping it's fine. It feels better today than it did yesterday, so you know.
That's good.
But anyways, excuse the mess. It hurt to literally set stuff up. Not that much though, so we're good. I'm just letting people roll in here. The plan for those who watch this after the fact or what have you, we're going to be talking about this most recent apparent Nintendo Switch Online Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance leak. We're going to be talking about this discussion about Breath of the Wild 2 potentially being a next generation game, or at least showing off next generation visuals from the most recent like update we got. We'll also be discussing the Bandai Namco job listings that are showing clear evidence that they are working on a project for Nintendo to remake something.
Yes.
What is this game? What is this secret Nintendo remake? We're going to be further discussing that tonight as well. And I don't know, it just seems like things are just leaking everywhere, because also we got a Xenoblade Chronicles 3 concept or key art leak apparently, because when you go to the actual source, it's not even there anymore. So it looks like Nintendo released it early on their website and then swapped it out again. I don't think it's necessarily a big deal, but we'll be talking about that as well. So that's kind of the basic plan for the evening. Those 4 big topics. There will be other things discussed as well. I know that there is like speculation that there may be Pokemon Scarlet and Violet news coming fairly soon. It does make some sense for there to be Pokemon Scarlet Violet news relatively soon. I would have to kind of do some research to
a little bit more about it in May or June.
Right. Yeah. I mean that's sort of been my expectation as well, that we'll start to get like that steady flow of information after some sort of presentation early June or May, to your point. And so maybe we get like a Pokemon Presents next month, and then or early June, one or the other, and then after that point they start to release information every few weeks or every couple weeks or even every week. Perhaps it kind of becomes more and more consistent as we approach the release, presumably this November. So maybe we get news sooner, but yeah, I definitely think, you know, we're not that far from Scarlet and Violet news. I know there's some rumors suggesting maybe we get something before then. I'm not entirely committed to that happening. It could happen, but it may not be like a big thing. It might be like a little detail. We'll see. But
short trailer or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Something on Twitter.
Well, if we got a short trailer, that'd be pretty epic, actually. I'm not really expecting that, but it's hard to say. Like, there are people saying that there's going to be some sort of Pokemon news soon for a new game. Now, is that news on an already known new game like Scarlet and Violet? Is it just a bogus thing? or is it for something else? There can be multiple Pokemon releases in a year. They're not all.
Could be a spin-off. I don't
yeah,
think we
exactly.
know any this year yet.
Yeah. So it's hard to say with that one. Let me see here real quick. Again, I'm kind of waiting people for rolling before you sort of like jump into the topics here. Let's see. Because DE Fox was asking me, actually, one of the mods here, he sent me a few messages and was asking me that I should maybe talk about Scarlet and Violet. And I did see a few people suggest that there could be something soon, but I'm trying to see why specifically. Alright, so Central Leaks, the Pokédoko episode for April 24th will include the latest information for Pokemon games. Alright, so that's coming from Central Leaks, so, I would classify that as rumor territory, right?
What did they say?
The Pokédoko episode for April 24th will include the latest information on the Pokemon games.
Okay.
News possibly coming next week, Scarlet and Violet. Yeah, so I would... So it's a show. It could be Scarlet and Violet, so maybe next week we get some news on that, but it could be something else, so we'll see. We will see. Like it's kind of it, but based off historical precedents, usually we get like some sort of presentation closer to summer, and then the news starts to come out more frequently. But I do want to kind of go back and look at like the pattern of news coming out for each generation to see how it might compare to this year. I'll probably put together a video on that soon if it doesn't like already start coming by the time we put out that video. But yeah, we'll kind of see on that. Now let's just check in the chat here before we jump into things. Let's see. Guy you don't know, hello there. Nintendo Reconnect, hello. Joycey J, hello. Having Hope 5, hi. Happy Monday. David Q, or Davio Q, sorry. Nintendo Prime, what's up, man? Sweet Life of Dio Brando. Boggers, right? Super Chris, hello, thank you for modding. Brandon White, what's up, dude? Anonymous, sup, I'm here for the scoop, but also hard to find time for gaming nowadays. Timing is challenging. I'll start the podcast 15 minutes late or 15 and a half minutes late. Like, it ain't always easy.
Yeah, time is just precious these days.
I will say that, there is more time than we may realize, and we kind of tend to waste it on things that aren't necessarily very gratifying for us. Like, for example, I'm sure I waste way more time scrolling through my phone than I should. I'm absolutely certain of that.
Everybody does.
And the thing is, like, oftentimes I scroll through my phone, and it's not like I'm scrolling through seeing new pieces of information. It's the same stuff I saw that morning.
Yeah, you're doom scrolling, so you're just like looking through the same stuff, hoping to find like the one article that you missed or something.
Yeah, or the picture that like looks cool or something.
Yeah, sometimes I'll close an app and immediately reopen it. Just like, and be like, oh wait, that was the app I was just in. Close it again and reopen it again. Like, oh goddamn.
We're totally hooked. We're totally brainwashed. Like,
oh yeah, completely addicted. There's no hope.
I sometimes am proud of myself. I'm like, man, I left my phone alone for like an hour. That was impressive, Yeah. I will say,
I might get a phone call. I might get a message. Something. I might need something.
When I
might know what time it is. When
I go like outside to like exercise, or I'm playing sports, if I'm doing some sort of cool activity, I won't pay attention to my phone. Right? Like, I actually went to the beach this weekend. It was great. I didn't pay attention to my phone for like hours.
You gotta just leave your phone in the car or something when you do stuff like that.
I mean, if I'm at the beach, I probably won't sit down and go to my backpack and like, oh, let me see. Unless I'm there for like the whole day, right? And at some point or another, I'm like, all right, I'll kind of check in for a moment. But yeah, no, I definitely feel like we spend too much time like using our phone.
And not enough time on our Switch.
Right. No, for real. Like, if you want more time in your day, just stop paying attention to your phone as much.
Yeah, if you have an iPhone, go into the little iPhone activity report and feel bad about yourself every time you look at the time, and you'll spend less time on your phone.
Well, yeah, it'll show you how much you average in a day. And spoiler, like,
you realize probably it's like 6 hours or something.
If you got paid for that amount of time, you might not have to actually work. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of hours that people spend on their phones. Across the board.
You're
Mario,
probably on
hello
your phone
there.
right now listening to this podcast.
But that's a good
But that's
thing.
not a waste of time.
Yeah.
That's a good. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Saba,
good.
hello there. Gears of War Phoenix Edition. How are you feeling? How am I feeling? I was explaining earlier that it hurt to set up the show, right? But like, I honestly feel better now after one night of sleep than I did yesterday. And it didn't feel as bad as I thought. Like, I know with leg sprains, you tend to feel it like the day after more. And I was worried that maybe my arm might be the same, but I actually feel better today than I did yesterday. There's still pain, depending on certain angles, and there is swelling and bruising, but it's looking like a typical sprain, just like a really, really, really bad one. And I mean, you can see I can do everything. I just kind of feel a little awkwardness, and pain, but I'll be fine probably.
Yeah. At least you didn't break your arm. My brother.
I don't think I did.
When he was young, and he fell and he broke his arm, and you could just see like it was snapped. I don't have enough arms to show.
Yeah.
But it was snapped in half, like right down the middle, and it was just kind of flopping.
Yeah. That's bad. That didn't happen to me. I would have gone to the emergency room immediately obviously
sure.
at that point you don't have a choice. Yeah.
Unless you just want to have dangle arm for the rest of your life.
And this is not a health biology podcast, so
we are not doctors. We do not offer health.
I did just think about though I did just think for a moment, like, what if someone did break their arm to the point where it is like dangling? What would happen? Excuse me if this is too explicit, but what would happen if you didn't go to the doctor? Like, what would happen? It would probably heal, but it would probably heal in a very weird way, assuming the person didn't like die from bleeding out or something.
As long as you held it in a position where the bones could touch and actually like reconnect, they'd set again. They wouldn't like be good.
I have no idea. I don't know.
Fucked up way,
there may be some sort of book or article or video on this about what would happen.
If your arm, you could probably lose your arm.
Actually, yeah, it might. Like, okay, moving on. We're now gonna start We're gonna start talking about actual Nintendo stuff. I promise. Yeah. So make sure to like the stream, share it out, guys. But let's see here. Kirby Star vs. Ganon said hello. Thank you. Hello. How are you? Giancarlo. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is a game built especially for Switch. That's why the game looks so good. I am inclined to agree, and I think that can be the first topic of the day.
Yeah. It's a good segue.
Yeah, let's jump into it while you guys sort of roll in here, and Brandon and I just dive deep into Zelda stuff. And Brandon, I actually felt like you'd be really good for this because I know you pay attention more to like the technical side of things. Did you get a chance? And I didn't ask you beforehand, but did you get a chance to see that podcast where they talked about
Digital Foundries? Yeah, I mean, I watched their podcast every week, so I saw it naturally.
You saw it before it was being reported. So then. What did you make of what they said?
I think that...
Perhaps we should summarize what they said before we talk about what they said.
Do you have something pulled up with...
I don't. They said a few... We are paraphrasing here, so... I should have put something together, I didn't. But... Basically... There's three of them talking on a podcast, and they spoke about it for like 3-4 minutes. It wasn't like a huge, long, dedicated topic, but it
was just something that they mentioned, and I don't think that they were super thinking about it, which is why I think they gave the answer they did.
Yeah, probably. It wasn't like a big report planned and everything like that scripted. But and that's kind of the interesting thing about podcasts. Sometimes things can be just are said in passing. And
I'm sure there's tons of stuff I've said on the podcast that if you showed me it, I'd be like, why would I say that?
Yeah.
Why did I say that?
Sometimes, there can be some inaccuracies or, context or just errors. So basically, again, I'm paraphrasing here, so it's not exactly what was said, but from the gist, from what I remember, is they start talking about the recent update of Breath of the Wild 2. and they were talking about how it looked pretty advanced, it looked pretty impressive and looked cool, and that it, to them, almost seemed like the quality of the image was so impressive, the visuals, that they feel like it has to be coming from either A, more powerful hardware, or they have doctored the visuals in some way,
right,
to make it more presentable.
I think they were thinking that either it was some kind of new hardware or it was a pre-rendered video. I don't think it's either of those.
I think it's just a game.
I think that they said, I remember two of them. There might have been another one, but I think they said resolution, and specifically the fact that it looked like it had much better image quality, like better anti-aliasing and stuff than the original Breath of the Wild, which didn't have any.
And the other thing they mentioned was volumetric clouds.
Yeah, volumetric clouds.
Which to me was strange, because even if those clouds are that, and even if that is something that's not really the Switch can't handle, which I am not saying, right? But let's say all that is the case. Those parts, those visuals that were shown in the update were the same visuals that were in the trailer from last year. So why is that now part of the discussion? If that was the case last summer, why are they talking about it now?
I think it was just something that they noticed now, because they don't really... Digital Foundry doesn't keep up with Nintendo as much, just because I think their fans don't... A lot of their fans don't care as much, and Nintendo
they're typically not cutting edge.
Technically advanced, yeah, they're not cutting edge.
From a graphics
Mostly they just keep up with
guess.
stuff like ports, like Doom Eternal and stuff like that. Stuff where they can compare like the Switch to other systems, which I find to be more interesting videos, I think, than what they could do just looking at every single game. But as such, they don't have a ton of Switch coverage. So they probably didn't even see the E3 video last year. They were probably busy covering something else from E3.
Yeah, right now I just kind of Googled volumetric clouds.
But, I mean, I can see why they might think it, like, it does look... I'd have to go back and check, but I remember, like, it does look like there's at least some form of anti-aliasing. And volumetric clouds can be expensive. But I don't think those two features existing are out of the realm of possibility. Like, the original Breath of the Wild was barely made with the Switch in mind. Like, they pretty much had, like, 6 months to a year to try and optimize it while they're trying to finish the game before they shipped it.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't understand volumetric clouds and what that exactly means entirely. I Googled it for Unreal Engine. It's like a dynamic engine that it can employ a number of different things. So... Yeah. It's kind of a very broad term, actually.
It's essentially a way to, like, make clouds with, the name is pretty self-explanatory. Like, volumetric clouds, they actually have volume. They're 3D objects that take up space.
You know what clouds I think look pretty impressive, that I would say appear to be more impressive or more demanding than what we've seen in the trailer for Breath of the Wild 2? The clouds in Xenoblade 2. Right, yeah. And that was a 2017 game. The game was made by a small team. It took less than 2 years to develop, and it was rushed. And again, that was back in 2017. Not Nintendo's biggest team, a very small team. It wasn't even Monosoft, all hands on deck, or anything of the sort.
Yeah, it was like 20 or 30 people.
I mean, a common remark for Xenoblade 2 is that it seems to be employing a lot of advanced sort of visual techniques, but it doesn't seem to be very well optimized, or at least it's just not running as well as we would like it to run on Switch. So, point is, though...
showing a ton of techniques that Nintendo hadn't really put in, like, any of their games.
But the point is that if Xenoblade 2 could have something like that, on a much larger scale, by the way, you could just jump into those sea of clouds from any sort of Titan and just swim around for, like, a large expanses. Now, it's usually just the Titan and the clouds, but the Titan is very large. I guess, but basically, like, it's bigger than any world in Mario Odyssey, right? Like, they're pretty big.
Yeah, pretty big.
So, you know, it's just, if we can see that in Xenoblade 2, and what we're seeing in Breath of the Wild 2 has clouds, I just don't see how that's, like, an indicator that, yeah, for sure, there's no way this could run on Switch. Like, even if this volumetric cloud thing, which I do not entirely understand, right, to be fair, is something that Switch can't really handle.
Either.
why can't Nintendo come up with something that's some sort of equivalent or similar to it? Like, we see them do that all the time with a number of things, right? Like, there are a number of ways to there are a number of potential solutions for a problem when it comes to developing for games. That's something I think people who understand coding to some extent will agree with. So even if
you understand coding to any extent, like, you should know there's a million different ways to solve every problem.
Not to mention that this game is not gonna not come on Nintendo Switch, right? So that's something I think that should be covered first. Like, is it possible that there will be 2 versions of Breath of the Wild 2?
I'd say it's
possible.
Pretty likely.
We'll get to maybe not at launch. Yeah, we'll get to that. But the real point here is that while there may be 2 versions at some point, there will still be the version that comes to Nintendo Switch that will be playable on all Nintendo Switches, including the originals that came out back in 2017. So regardless of what happens here, the essential visuals that we see are still going to be intact for the base game. Like, I don't see Nintendo ever doing that where they just completely they're not going to cut out Switch. First off, that would be stupid, because there's over 100 million people there. Not to mention they initially promised it would be on Switch, so they'd be making bad on that promise. Think about this. They didn't do it for Wii U. It was, if there was ever a time to cut out a version that they initially promised, it would have been Wii U, and they didn't. They did not. So that's not going to happen.
2 million or so
right.
copies, or it was like 3 million or something.
Most people who were waiting for Breath of the Wild on Wii U, once they heard that it was coming out on Switch, like me, just got it on Switch instead. There's a small portion who didn't, but for the most part they did. And even then, Nintendo still decided to make sure it still comes to Wii U. So they're not going to all of a sudden decide on the Switch, which is at least 10, is going to be 9 to maybe 8 to 9 times more successful, probably more so once everything's said and done, than Wii U. They're just not going to do that.
The Wii U sold like 13 million, so it's already,
that's why I said 8 to 9 times, but it could conceivably get to 10, which would be 130 million. That's not a stretch 2 years from now. So yeah, there shouldn't be any sort of concern in terms of Breath of the Wild 2 coming to Nintendo Switch. It is going to come. But going back to what you wanted to sort of talk about earlier, though, will there be 2 different versions? And the visuals that we saw, was that a hint towards a better version?
I don't think it was, but it could have been. I don't know. I'd have to go back and actually look at it, because I do remember like image quality in the trailers being very good. So I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Switch version, the base Switch version, won't have anti-aliasing. Maybe it will look a little blurrier, a little less clear, a little more aliasing.
But it was also like a cutscene. It was clearly a cutscene, right? Like, maybe in engine or however you choose to sort of refer to that. But like, I mean, I don't know the specifics, but I'm sure that they can make it look pretty clean. I feel pretty confident in saying that what we saw in that trailer is pretty much exactly how it's going to reflect in the final version of the game. Now, if it changes, it's just because they've made changes to the game across the board. It's not like it's going to be scaled down. It's just going to be, it may just be adjusted for whatever it is that they're trying to get done.
I don't think there's anything, like the assets themselves, I don't think there's anything in the game that looks like it couldn't be switched. There's not like insane levels of draw distance or like zero pop-in, or like something that would indicate, oh, this is clearly either pre-rendered or running on a next-gen Switch.
It's funny that you bring that up, because I actually, while there's people arguing that this looks almost next-gen for Switch, I feel like I'm on the opposite end. I don't actually think what we've seen from Breath of the Wild 2 is like necessarily vastly better than Breath of the Wild 1. Now, the initial trailer... The initial trailer, some of the stuff there is pretty good looking, right?
But like, the initial trailer blows their base game out of the water.
But whenever we see, all the cutscenes we've seen, like, that are based off like in like underground or in some sort of tomb or in like the land side, the surface of Hyrule, it looks pretty much like Breath of the Wild to me. It doesn't look anything better. It actually looks kind of, I'm gonna say it looks almost kind of plain. Like for example, there's that one little shot where Link has like that flamethrower shield and he's fighting some sort of like weird gelatinous worm thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's a cool looking scene, don't get me wrong, but everything in that room is just basically like a fairly basic rock texture or something, or like an old like sort of, and maybe it's not rock or some sort of stone like structure. Like it's very basic looking is my point. It's not super aesthetically pleasing or like super technically impressive is the point I'm trying to make here.
There are some parts of it I think are better. I need to go back and check, but I remember at least in the original trailer there were a lot of lights that cast shadows and stuff, and the general lighting looked way better. And I'm pretty sure in that cutscene that part of the trailer that you're talking about, the flamethrower was casting shadows off of the enemy, which no flame like if you held a torch in Breath of the Wild and you stood next to a box, there would just be light on the other side of the box from the torch. It wouldn't block anything or cast any shadows at all.
Interesting.
And I'm pretty sure that there is shadow casting lights in that part of the trailer. I know there is 100% in the original trailer, but I'd have to go back and check. So there might be like some smaller aspects that don't stand out right away because you're not looking at that part.
Which could be reflective of just an overall improved lighting engine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but
yeah,
I guess the point
when we saw the surface of Hyrule, very plain, looked just exactly like that scene where he's flying and there's the stone talus with the columns on it. You could have told me that was Breath of the Wild DLC or something. I would have believed you. Right.
It's very believable. So to me, I actually find this discussion to be a little perplexing. And in truth, this is my opinion on it. I honestly think there's a bit of this narrative that Switch just can't run anything. That everything looks like doo-doo on Switch. Like, it's almost like, so if you go back to the 360 PS3 era, there were games at the time that looked visually impressive, right? And I think people look at things like, say, Witcher 3 or Doom and just think that pretty much games on Switch have to be a blurry mess. They can't be clear and crisp, right? There were games back on PS3 360 that were clear and crisp. The Switch is more capable than those systems. So I think some people just kind of, they see something that is very clean, very clear, very vivid, and visually pleasing, and they're like, oh, there's no way it's running on Switch because it doesn't look like a blurry mess. Like, I think sometimes people just kind of, they look at certain games that are developed with a higher spec range, and then they have to be scaled down to run on Switch. That's why they are the way they are, right? Like, in order for a game to look really good and be clean, it usually has to be developed with Switch in mind, right? When you're scaling down for things like Witcher and Doom, well, one of the first things you need to sort of go to get it to run is scale down that resolution, right?
Yeah, you gotta
scale down the
resolution.
Textures. Like, that kind of needs to be done in order for it to run on Switch. But if it was developed for Switch in mind, they would look different.
Right. Unless you're going to create assets specifically with Switch in mind, you're essentially just going to use like lower LED versions of assets, which aren't meant to be used, like, looked at up close. So essentially, like, a lot of games like The Witcher or less so Doom Eternal, because I think they actually did go back and make a lot of stuff, but they just kind of look like bad. Like, the assets just look really bad. They don't look. The art team didn't go back and actually design textures that would look good at that lower resolution. They just kind of crushed everything down to a lower resolution. It was like, here you go, this will work. You know, I think when you see something made with the Switch in mind, it's definitely going to look a lot better. I also think a lot of people forget how bad a lot of 360 and PS3 games actually looked. Because I think a lot of people forget, like, we're so used to 4K and stuff, we forget that, like, we just got the 1080p with the PS4 generation. Most of, like, the Xbox 360, PS3, they run at like 720p, sometimes less, like typical Switch type resolutions. And I think people are seeing that kind of stuff and being like, they don't remember that we just had that not that long ago on consoles.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is just kind of people assuming Switch can't run certain things. Have you seen Kirby and the Forgotten Land? Like, it's on a smaller scale, but it's a very visually pleasing game. Like, there's a lot of really just
the textures,
very eye-popping moments.
The lighting is great. It really does like almost have this hyper real look to some of the environments at times, in a strange way.
Kind of like Mario Odyssey to an extent.
Yeah, I'd say it looks more. Since the levels are smaller, the textures are there's a lot more varied textures and they're a lot higher resolution. So there are some things I think they're doing that are better than Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from with that. Yeah, for sure. There are games on Switch that look good. It would be kind of fun to just kind of think of like the best looking games on Switch.
3 looks awesome. Also has volumetrics and stuff as well. We've seen in the trailers.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I could
better than 2. Right?
I could see that going down as one of the most, if not the most, like visually impressive Switch game. It's gonna be in the conversation.
I think when it gets hopefully, fingers crossed, some kind of 4K patch for Switch 2, that's going to be one of the best looking games that launch on that system.
You know, I'm glad you kind of brought up the 4K patch idea, because it kind of brings us back to the whole, like, next version for Breath of the Wild 2. Right. If there is, like, another version, right? So there's this kind of conversation to be had here. And I think another reason why that topic even came up is because there have been people thinking that Nintendo is going to be putting out new hardware. Obviously, there's going to be new hardware. It really just comes down to when and what will it sort of change. Is it going to be a mid-gen refresh where you just play your same Switch games on that system and they just run and look a little bit better, kind of like PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, right? Is it going to be like that? Or is it going to be next generation entirely, where there's a clear cutoff, and if you want to get games for Switch 2, you literally have to get games that have Switch 2 on the box, or otherwise it won't work, right? Or is it going to be some sort of middle ground between there, which I've been speculating on, but it's kind of like uncharted territory here. So hard to kind of say exactly what's going to happen, but because Breath of the Wild 2 has been delayed to spring 2023, a lot of people have been noticing, myself included. I put out a video not too long ago kind of talking about how this is a somewhat similar situation to when Breath of the Wild 1 was delayed for the second time. The year before was going to come. Well, it was actually like 2 years before. But anyway, point is, it was delayed, and they had a little update trailer, and that it turned up being the case that the game came out early on 2017 with new hardware. So are we going to see a situation again here where Breath of the Wild 2 has been pushed into early 2023, where it may be releasing alongside new hardware? Considering the history of Zelda games releasing alongside new hardware, it does kind of make you think maybe there could be something there. My one real sort of hesitation with that, though, is that I think spring 2023 is still a bit early. I would think holiday 2023. Now, if Breath of the Wild 2 is delayed to holiday 2023, like if Nintendo had just said, hey, we're going to delay the game, and they just said 2023, I would have thought, okay, for sure, this is coming out alongside new hardware and in the second half of 2023. But because it said spring is before the second half, which is in the first half, and typically spring games for Nintendo mean March, typically, to close out the fiscal year. So I think it would just be a little early. Now, could they do it? Yeah. Like, if you look at how Nintendo handled the 3DS, the idea of them coming out with new hardware 13, 14, 15 months after a previous one, that's how it was every single time. So, if Nintendo were to come out with new hardware March 2023, that would be 18 months, I may be off by a month, but about a year and a half after Switch OLED, which would be a shorter window between all the other Switch revisions, but
yeah, a little bit.
But it would be comparable to what we saw for 3DS revisions, which would suggest that it's within the realm of plausibility for Nintendo to do. So it could happen. It just seems a little bit off the pattern for what Nintendo's doing with Switch.
Yeah, it seems strange because I'm wondering I don't know. I feel like, yeah, I agree with your initial statement that if they had just said 2023, I would have been like, oh, for sure, they're delaying this so that they can get it on the new system next year. But Nintendo doesn't need to release a new system in spring like they did the last time. They could, but it would be strange. And I feel like at this point, you might as well launch in the holidays so that you can get more stock as well. Although we are seeing you can actually buy certain GPUs from stores now, and other things are actually becoming available-ish. So maybe by spring it would be fine enough, actually.
Yeah.
But I would have just thought they would have waited for holiday.
I mean, what I think is probably the more likely scenario here is that Breath of the Wild 2 will not release as new hardware spring 2023. Watch it happen, because I actually do want it to happen, just for the record. But if it doesn't, I'm gonna say it doesn't happen, right? And if it doesn't happen, maybe they come out with new hardware at the end of 2023 or sometime in 2024. Really, that's kind of like when it could happen, right? And when that happens, they release updates for particular big games. Like you mentioned, a 4K update for maybe Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Maybe there'll be one for Splatoon 3. Probably one for Breath of the Wild 2. And if there's actually DLC for these major games, maybe once that DLC is complete, it's kind of like, hey, here's new content for Xenoblade 3. Here's new content for Splatoon 3, Breath of the Wild 2. Free on Nintendo Expansion Online. And there's a 4K patch for each game as well to run incredibly better on your new Switch 2 or whatever they call it. Like, I can see that happening, which wouldn't be too different from how PlayStation has handled some of their games where they have like a remastered version of a game that came out like a year or two ago. They were really big releases.
Usually for the next gen systems, Xbox and PlayStation have both been coming out with like updates. Sony sometimes charges depending on the developer. But typically, Xbox are just free updates. I imagine these would just be free. One would hope. Although I wouldn't mind paying like an extra $5 or $10 if the developer actually went back. Like, say, Doom Eternal, they actually went back and made a version with Switch 2 in mind that runs at 4K and has better actual assets in the game as well. I'd be down for that. That'd be nice. But hopefully, most developers just go the free update route and just make DLSS work with their engine.
I mean, if the games have dynamic resolutions, like, those should just like run better, right? Like that's...
Yeah, they'll just run better. Anything with frame rate issues should just be cleaned up.
Yeah, which I'm totally fine with. I think that'd be great. Like, I'd actually love to play Doom and just kind of see it look clean, you know?
Yeah, clean it as much as a anti-aliased 720p image can be. But better than the going down to like 540p it does now.
Yeah, so, I mean, is there anything else to say on this topic? Like, I don't think what we've seen is any suggestion towards Breath of the Wild 2 being next gen. I think that's just Breath of the Wild 2 looking good. And that's pretty much it. It's not really... I don't even think it's showing anything that Switch can't handle. I think it's just a bit of a negative narrative for Switch visuals.
The only thing that maybe is, I'd have to go back and check, if it is like a full 1080p with nice anti-aliasing, that aspect may be different in the actual Switch release. But that is the only thing I can see being different.
You know, but I will bring up, we have seen a lot of people for the last couple of years actually speculate, oh man, this is like a 1080p image of Splatoon 3. That must be for Switch 2, you know, or like... or for Nintendo Switch Sports more recently. Like, people keep assuming that these really nice looking like elements or aspects of the footage or media Nintendo's providing for their games is some sort of suggestion to it being new hardware around the corner. But it could just be that, hey, they have higher quality versions of their games that they're just like, hey, here it is, you know? They
just render out the scene at a higher resolution and they just run it on their PC that they're building the game on.
So maybe the truth is there is more powerful hardware out there. It's called a computer. And Nintendo's just kind of showcasing the game in a best case scenario.
Right. Which Digital Foundry did pose as an option, by the way, so.
Yeah.
Also, I would like to point out, I just remembered Yoshi's Crafted World back in the day when it was first shown off, ran at a full 1080p 60. I think the game came out and it was like a dynamic 720p. So Nintendo has shown trailers that have significantly better image quality than the actual game before, but that's the only one I can actually think of.
The actual
every other game,
assets are
like
the same, it's just a
worse.
game running better, basically.
Yeah, just running at a higher resolution.
Yeah, so we'll see on that.
Every once in a while they do that.
And again, this Breath of the Wild 2 thing's a cutscene, right? So like the cutscenes may be based off like actual in-game stuff, but what they actually do is that they run those in-game stuff at the best possible spec range, and they record it, and then they put it as a video file or something, you know?
Yeah.
Or it's just like ideal sort of scenario for the system to run better if it's just like, you know, cutscene.
I think Breath of the Wild does that. I think all of the cutscenes are the native 900p on Switch.
Is the game...
Or is
I don't think the game has a dynamic resolution. I think it's across the board 900p.
It is a dynamic resolution.
Oh, does it?
It goes down to 720p pretty often.
Whatever. Like, I don't remember that at all, but, you know, it's like...
It's hard to notice, but I know it's a fact, like, I've seen the numbers. I've seen the data that it does do this, but it's not, like, super obvious. Honestly, the difference between 720p and 900p isn't that different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, let's check in the chat here, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Jean-Carlo is saying that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has volumetric clouds. So if Xenoblade Chronicles 2 actually has literal volumetric clouds, then the argument that Switch can't have volumetric clouds is just wrong, because Xenoblade 2 has it. I don't know if that's what that would be considered, again, but whatever the clouds are in Xenoblade 2, they're pretty advanced, and I'd say they're more advanced than we saw in Breath of the Wild.
They are some form of volumetric clouds. They're not... Because the alternative would be that they were 2D sprite layers stacked on top of each other. To look 3D, which is definitely not the case.
Which kind of goes back to the point I brought up earlier, that even if it's not like the standard thing we see like in Unreal Engine or what have you, it's some sort of Nintendo customized version, which again, there are multiple solutions for multiple problems. Like, that's just kind of how it is. So, you know.
Yep.
Point is, what we saw for Breath of the Wild 2 probably is running on Switch. So, yeah.
I think so.
Moving forward here, I'm gonna focus on ads for now. I don't know, Brandon. Maybe you understand what Super Chris was referring to when he said this, but he said like Ratchet and Clank Future Tools of Destruction.
Oh, I know what game he's talking about, but I don't.
Like in reference to what,
so
right?
Long that I assume he's talking about like volumetric clouds and that. I don't know if there were. That's like a PS2 game.
Yeah, I was just kind of scrolling through the chat here, so I'm not sure what the situation was.
Great game, though. Great game, great reference.
There has to be a lot of... Yeah. Giancarlo Adamy, Luigi Mansion 3 looks like a Pixar movie. Kinda, right?
Yeah,
like, it
does. That game has anti-aliasing, too.
Yeah, those cutscenes are very impressive looking.
Oh, yeah, they look so good.
Yeah.
The lighting on that and the animation quality is so good.
Yeah. Hello there, Solo. How are you? All C Bros X. Designing a new Switch probably takes longer than a 3DS because they have to take the dock into account with the new Switch, not just handheld.
I think they use the same dock from... they change things about it. Like, I think most of the internals are actually the same for all their different docks.
But he said designing, right? So designing could talk about the internals, but it also does mean the aesthetics, right? Like, you're designing two pieces of hardware as opposed to one. Like factually, like there is more to sort of think about.
Right. I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's a ton more specifically because of the dock. I think there are definitely other things that could make that the case.
The other thing to consider, though, right, is that Switch games do run differently in dock mode versus handheld mode. So when with the new hardware, I'm sure that's something else they have to take into account of the two different spec ranges, right? And maybe what they may be thinking about is a way to make it more of a seamless transition. Like, obviously it's a seamless transition to Switch, but I mean more of like for developers potentially. when they're designing their games.
I think that's all software based more so than hardware.
Yeah, I don't know though. Maybe there's something in the hardware that could help support that better. I'm not sure. But
maybe, but I don't know of anything that would exist or need. I'm not thinking of any limitation that would need any sort of hardware, but I am not an expert.
I mean, the other thing is maybe developers want to have sort of free rein in terms of what they can do, right? Like maybe, like, would it be nice if like it was just kind of like, all right, so you got to get the game to run in handheld mode, but in docked mode you can scale up the resolution, you can scale up the frame rate, and you can scale up like the depth of field or what have you, or just how far you can see. Like maybe there are certain things that can just scale up, and it's sort of an across the board thing, but I'm sure there are some developers that would want to prioritize one thing or the other regardless of where it's at, right? Like maybe there are some developers that want you to be able to see just as far as you can in handheld mode as you can in docked mode, so they'd rather sacrifice something else instead.
I think all those parameters are dictated by the developer. I'm sure in Nintendo's API there are like tools for making modes, but I'm pretty sure the modes themselves are completely dictated by the developer, because we see that kind of stuff already all the time on Switch, where like draw distance will be a little bit lower in handheld mode, or like there will be missing some kind of feature. I think even depth of field, as you mentioned, is one of the typical ones. So yeah, those are kind of like things that developers are already doing pretty commonly.
Okay. So let's move forward here. What should we tackle next, Brandon? We got 3 other big topics to cover. Well, actually, the Xenoblade 3 one's probably not like a big topic.
Right.
And just between you and me, this is a bit of a teaser for the future, guys, but there is a discussion topic that I presented to you earlier in the day that I do not want to be addressed in this podcast because it would make the video pointless. So we're not talking about that. I'm not sure
what you're referring to.
Then don't worry about it. All we're talking about here is a Xenoblade Chronicles 3 concept art and no other related thing outside of the concept art.
Alright.
Like, you can talk if the concept art gives you ideas for other things, that's totally fine.
Look at what you
That's totally fine. Just don't bring up what I messaged you that we're going to talk about later on in the week. Don't do that. As soon as you check
yeah.
You remember now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're saving that for a little bit later.
Topic.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm kind of... Should I be concerned about even like... It's kind of in the thumbnail already, so... I don't know if I should be worried about sharing this image.
Like Nintendo trying to strike down the video or something?
Yeah.
Because, no. I don't think that they would do that. Nintendo's typically not super, like... I mean, they put it out themselves. Like, I think it'd be one
it's
thing.
not stolen. It's something they put out themselves. Yeah. I think most other people sort of shared it. So I think it's probably fine. If it's not, I'm sorry. Please forgive. Anyway, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Nope. I think I lost it.
Into the void it goes.
Yeah, I lost it. I had it pulled up earlier. Actually, you know what? I have the image saved. I can just... No. I'll share it this way. Xenoblade 3... Key art. You saw it already, though, right?
Yeah, I've seen it on Twitter.
The Twitters... That's not a high resolution version. I'm trying to find like a good quality version, but
yeah,
I saw like a 360p version. I'm close. I think an article might have the source. Someone had it on Twitter. Let's see here. No, I hate it when an article doesn't have a source. Like, what are you doing?
Unprofessional.
What are you doing? Why? I probably liked it though. On Twitter.
I might be able to.
I'm just trying to find it real quick. I mean, this image is fine. I found a good image, so we're okay.
It's good enough.
Yeah, all right, I'm gonna show you guys now. Without further delay. There, that's it. That's the butte we're discussing right now. And yeah, so basically Nintendo posted this, and then people went to it, and it was gone. So in other words, Nintendo did not mean to reveal this piece of art yet for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And it's just a very clean sort. It's not like the graphics of the game. This is just like the art for the game, right? Like this might be what the box art is and what we see on our Switch screens when it's loaded up. And it's just beautiful. Now what's interesting, right, is that we basically have an image for this beforehand, but it only had 2 of the main characters, not all 6.
Right.
And we just have a very clear view, and it shows all 6 there. And it's kind of a typical sort of Xenoblade Chronicles style, where it's a beautiful green field. You have the Monado like blade thing, and the character, the title, and some sort of cool mega structure in the background, right?
It's very, very, very similar to the Xenoblade 2 key art.
Yeah. I mean, and interestingly, right, we do see the Mechonis blade from Xenoblade 1, which I believe is featured in Xenoblade 1's key art, and then what's left of the giant whale titan, I forgot the name of it.
Uriah, I think.
Yeah, Uriah. Yeah, I think you're right. That's featured in the Xenoblade 2 art, for the record. So, like, it's kind of both merged here. And what's fascinating is that, yeah, we see some pretty neat things. Now, I saw someone speculating that perhaps the Biona's shoulder is in this image. If you look sort of between I forget the name of the characters, but there's a guy with the red jacket who's like the main character, right?
Noah, I think.
Okay, maybe Noah. And then the guy with the orange scarf. Like if you look in between there, you'll see almost like bridge like land structures, which is reminiscent of what we saw in the Biona's shoulder, apparently, for Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Now I don't know if it exactly is that. I don't think this is 100% proving that. But if it is, what I do think is going to be the case, though, regardless, is that we are going to see a lot of similar terrain and structures, or literally sort of reimaginings of a lot of structures we saw in both Xenoblade 1 and 2, because the idea here is the worlds have been merged, right? Like that's the basic sort of premise of this art we're seeing here. We're seeing 2 mega structures that were things we could literally explore. They were large, both the sword and the whale were large open areas we could explore in their respective games, and now they're being shown together. And that, to me, is just an expression of the merged worlds, and I think throughout the world, we are going to be seeing a lot of things from both games, and sort of re-exploring them, obviously, in a different way. And that's exciting, right? Like, if you were a Xenoblade fan, playing through Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to be kind of like a marriage of all of that. But also, to what you were sort of alluding to earlier, Brandon, like, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is kind of like more ambitious than previous games.
Yeah.
It's sort of all hands on deck from what we've heard. It's just kind of, Monosoft is at an all-time high right now in terms of like capability, and it seems that they've been taking their time with this project, unlike Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and it's kind of set up to be a very, very well done Xenoblade game, and probably also going to end up being the most successful as well.
I would think so. I think, maybe we could even see Xenoblade break into that kind of, closer to the 5 million territory. Because I think 2 is sold almost 3 now.
Really?
I'm not sure. I think so. I might be mistaken on that. It's been a while since I checked the numbers, but it's between 2 and 3, I'm pretty sure, right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's over 2, for absolutely. no doubt there. I think I got a notification from Nintendo about
about the Switch 2.
I think it was
just got announced right now.
Close.
Live on stream.
Tetris 99.
Close? What?
Tetris 99 Maximus Cup event will run this weekend, and it will include Kirby and the Forgotten Land content. Oh my god!
Are you sure that can run on Switch? Tetris is a pretty demanding game.
Well, it's already on Switch.
Oh, wow.
But if it has a Kirby background, though, I don't know. That might be too much power.
Yeah. With those Kirby textures.
It might be. But, yes, you heard it here. Probably not. Well, maybe. But, yeah, so if you're interested in the Tetris 99 event, that's happening this weekend, and you're going to be able to get that Kirby background with that Kirby music. So, I'm actually kind of interested in that. But, that's entirely off topic. Anyway, this is not necessarily a big sort of like topic. It's just key art. It's just really beautiful key art, and it is interesting that it was leaked.
Similar key art that we've already seen as well.
Yeah, it's not too different from what we saw before. You're right, but still, it's nice to see. It's clean looking. This has potential background. Could be a potential background in the future for myself. I love it. I'm excited for it.
I will say those land bridges they were talking about in the key art. They do kind of remind me of like Gower Plains, kind of have these like land bridged things in them.
Yeah,
in that area.
It may not be the Bionis shoulder necessarily, but it could just be something referencing, environments in Xenoblade 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally possible. I mean, if you think about what we saw in Xenoblade X. There's a whole bunch of like crazy sky islands and land bridges and things of that nature. So we could see more of that. I do see here that Birdman Senpai is telling us 2.4 million. That sounds more accurate to me, just because I thought it was hovering around 2.5. I do see Xenoblade Chronicles 3 getting to the 3 million mark, as I think Monado Mario is suggesting. I'd like it to get to the 5 though. I would like it to get there. But what will get it there, Maybe it is kind of treated as like the big sort of hardcore non-Pokemon Nintendo game to come out this holiday.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's kind of the big adventure game for the holiday now.
Right.
So.
I mean, Nintendo
might market it a lot.
It's coming out September, which is a little bit early.
A little bit, but not really.
When I say early, I just mean the sense that like it's not to me what they're going to be treating as their big holiday release, right? But I mean,
I'm trying to think of what would be their big holiday release if it's not Xenoblade. Like they have Bayonetta is not going to be a big holiday release.
I think their strategy here is just an embarrassment of riches. Like they don't need to have like a single game that stands above all others. It's just more about having a number of high quality stuff. We go back to last year. We had Metroid Dread. We had Shin Megami Tensei 5, which, by the way, apparently is the best selling in the series and has sold over 1 million recently, so that's great for that series. But Metroid Dread, SMT 5, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. There is the new Mario Party Superstars, correct? And there's a few others, but those 4 big ones all came out within a 2-month span. So. It could be something like that, right? There have been rumors that Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope is going to come out around the holiday. So maybe it's a situation where it's Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it's Bayonetta 3, it's Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it's Mario Rabbids, and maybe Metroid Prime Remake. Like, that's...
Yeah, Metroid Prime Remake, for sure.
None of those games are going to be like... Well, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is actually huge, just for the record. It's open world Pokemon game. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet actually probably will be the best-selling Pokemon game in the series.
Million.
I think it's going to be the best-selling game in the series, actually.
Could be.
I mean, I'm only saying that because it's like the most ambitious one yet. And I think consumers respond well to Game Freak being ambitious, hence why Legends Arceus was so successful. And if Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is a full-on open-world Pokemon game that's fully mainline, I think that might reflect even better than Legends Arceus. Although you can make the argument that the reason Legends Arceus was showing such strong sales potential had more to do with them kind of focusing more on it being an adventure. Maybe. I think it might have to do with the sort of like simply like the openish exploration element to it. I think that was a real big selling point there, and if they market that for Scarlet and Violet but on a larger scale, I think that's gonna be a big deal for it.
Right. We still don't know what they're doing with Scarlet and Violet yet, so I think it's too early for me to really judge.
Yeah.
How ambitious it will be in terms of changing up the formula of the series.
I mean, we know it's going to be open world, and we know the battles are... I mean, we can surmise from what we've seen so far that the battles are going to be similar to how they were in Legends of Arceus. Not in terms of the battle, not the battle engine, but in terms of entering and exiting the battles. So that's really cool.
Having battles be in the actual environment.
But yeah, more of that seamless transition, which I think is a big step for the series.
I think it's absolutely required for an open world game. Like, at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Milano Mario added me. By the way, recently there's a bad opinion tweet from a known user saying how Xenoblade is struggling to improve its sales because sexualization and complex combat that's capped with Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I did see that. I did not agree with it. I think I responded, actually.
I think there are... I do think that certain parts of the game, like the overly sexualized characters and the very complex battle system, could definitely have contributed to lower sales than what we got, but Xenoblade did factually increase and grow the IP. Like, the second game did do that. But I do think there was a lot of negativity just in general around how the characters looked, and when people played it, a lot of people got turned off by the poorly tutorialized battle system. I'll say that. That's how I'll word it.
So I'll say that it is interesting, right? Like, is there a way where they could sort of design the characters and do the battle engine where it will lead to better sales? Yeah, I think the answer to that is an obvious yes, but I also don't think that what Xenoblade 2 had was severely limiting. I think it's just kind of what it is. I don't think
it would have, like, broke the 5 million barrier.
Like, I mean, if that was the case, like, why is Fire Emblem still kind of hovering in only the 3 million range, right? Because no one really complains about...
To be fair, those are very overly sexualized anime characters.
You could argue that's what got Fire Emblem to sort of still stick around, though, right? Fire Emblem Awakening sort of, like, kind of pushed that among a few other things. And that sort of brought back the series.
Though I wouldn't argue that aspect of Awakening being the main reason that it sold.
It's just... I don't know. The point is that was an element of Awakening, and that's sort of been carried on with the series. Yeah. I personally have no problems with it, just for the record. I don't really think it's an issue. I think it's also kind of like an anime culture thing.
Look much better than 2.
Say it again.
I will say I like the character designs in 3 better than 2, so that we've seen so far.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to that point though, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is not going to have... It does have art that's perhaps more comparable to 1, I guess, but in a more modern way, in the sense that it is, I guess, more...
kind of seems like a fusion of
less over-the-top character designs, to put it nicely, right? Like, so, I do think maybe I don't know how large of an audience that actually is. I think the bigger thing is the battle engine. And I think what it is that it is a hard game to get into. And I think that's the main point here. If Xenoblade Chronicles 3...
very slow at the beginning.
Right.
Like, super boring to play the beginning battles.
If Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is constructed in a way where it's a lot easier to get into and pick up, and then that, I think, can sort of help to propel itself. And I think that was... if there is, like, a serious limitation to Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it is that. Not so much the character designs. It's just how well the game gets other people to be invested. So if the game is something that can bring more people in more easily, then that could lead to more people playing it, more people talking about it, and then that, it can sort of expand, right? So maybe they kind of come up with an engine that just goes over really well with newcomers, brings people in. It's still deep and complex because that's what we like about our Xenoblade engines, but you know, it still is good at bringing people in, and maybe that does lead to going beyond the 2.5 million. I'm thinking at least 3, but
if they build off of the battle system they made Torna, I think it'd be very well, because that was very well explained. It was pretty much Xenoblade Chronicles 2 battle system without the fluff, and it was amazing. It was great. It was the best the battle system has been in the series, in my opinion.
Let me try to make a point with you.
I think it'd be good.
Let me try to make a point with you. I feel that a big part of the success for Breath of the Wild, for Mario Odyssey, for Monster Hunter Rise, is that when those games came out, they had very fun engines where you can kind of do a whole bunch of cool, crazy things. And then people would go to social media and show what they did, what they accomplished, and people are like, "Whoa, how did you do that? How'd that happen?" And that gets more people talking about it.
All the time.
Right. Now, you know, it's a little bit different for an RPG, but it would be interesting to see how they put together the battle engine for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, because there's some really cool, crazy stuff that can happen in that game that could lead to more people sort of sharing and talking about it, right? Especially if the engine is a little easy to get into. I mean, Metro Dread's another good example of that, right? I mean, in general, we see that for just games because, you know, it's a social media age, but I think those games sort of lend itself a little bit more because of all the cool things you could do that weren't like absolutely like mandatory to do. So it'll be interesting to see if the flexibility of the new engine for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and how well you could get into it, because that I think is a bigger point to be made in terms of how well Xenoblade Chronicles 3 could end up being sold. I don't think the designs will make that big of a difference, but I do agree that these designs are a bit more, I guess, what's the word? Digestible for a larger... Palatable for a larger viewership or consumer base, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just... people see any sort of anime-like thing and tend to disregard it a lot of the times in the West. So inevitably there are going to be people who see Xenoblade 3 and be like, that's not a realistic looking game, blah. So, but I do think it looks a lot more westernized in the way that the characters look.
It looks more like what I would say, I'm just throwing a term out there, like mature anime. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, there's anime and there's anime that's kind of clearly more geared to like an older audience. They're using older looking characters. These characters look more like Rex adults. Or like, I
did not like the fact that Rex was so young. It was just off. I feel like it actually hindered parts of the storyline, that there were certain threads and certain plot lines that they were trying to do that hit way less hard because he was a kid.
Here's the only thing. I think it makes sense in general for Nintendo to market with, and specifically to, young adults, because kids want to do what young adults are doing, for the record, right? So if you're marketing to young adults, when kids see it, they're still going to want to play that, right? As long as it's understood that they're allowed to play it, their parents will get the game for them, right? I think it makes more sense to target towards that. And what has happened, if you just look at Nintendo's marketing, most of their trailers, especially the early ones, like the initial trailer, it was featuring young adults. And what has happened, the Switch has become the most successful Nintendo home console ever. If it hasn't passed Wii yet, it's like right about to. And the Wii, I mean, kind of had a false audience, if I would say, in the sense that like the casuals bought a few games, but they weren't buying as many core games as core gamers buy on Switch. So I think Nintendo needs to market towards young adults. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 does kind of fit that idea. So I think that could actually, maybe that does sort of help a little.
Yeah. I already said it. I just don't like the fact that Rex was young and annoying and way younger than literally like everybody else in the game. It was strange.
It is a little odd. I'll give you that. It is a little odd. It didn't make a big deal, but you know, yeah, it is a little odd. checking the chat here. Let's see here. Monado Mario, and even with Fire Emblem, it took them until Awakening to sell over 1 million. So yeah, Xenoblade is doing better than Fire Emblem to some degree, but are still great JRPGs from Nintendo. Yeah.
RPGs in general don't sell very well. So
traditional RPGs.
The fact that Xenoblade is in that like 2.5 million spot it's good. Like for an RPG, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nintendo
honestly,
believes that though.
Already. I
think Nintendo believes that though, because we're getting Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I think it's gonna get featured pretty well. So we'll see. All See Bros, Atomy, wind bombing in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. What if?
Wind bombing?
I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a reference to Breath of the Wild, where you could use the bomb to sort of have yourself be shot into a very far direction very quickly, which you're not supposed to be able to do in Breath of the Wild, but you can, and it's really cool. Let's see. Well, hello there. How you doing? Yes, Brandon is on the face cam.
Yeah.
In the flesh. Alright, so let's move on to the next topic here. We got two big ones left. Brandon, I know I said we'd go for about 90 minutes, which is about 18 minutes from now. But
I'm good. We can
math.
We got time.
Anyway, we gotta talk. We got this big potential Nintendo Switch Online Game Boy leak, and we also have this secret Nintendo remake. Which one do you want to cover first? Doesn't really matter. Remake. We're gonna talk about both. So let's talk about the remake. Okay, we're talking about the remake, and then we're gonna talk about the Game Boy leaks afterwards. Okay, so basically, Bandai Namco put up multiple job listings, and it's a project that's Nintendo. It's for Nintendo, and it's for a HD remake remaster of a 3D action game. That's it. Now, what would Nintendo hire Bandai Namco for? Like, what would Nintendo want? Why would Nintendo... I guess the point is, like, it's happening. Like, it's factually happening. The question is, what is it, right? So let's think about that for a second. Like, what would Nintendo hire Bandai Namco to do if it's going to be a 3D action remaster remake?
Right. I'm trying to think. What if they worked with... Let's see what they worked with Nintendo in the past before. I know they worked with them on Smash.
Yep, they made Smash for Wii U and 3DS. They made Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. They're behind new Pokemon Snap. They're behind Pokken Tournament. It would be interesting to get like an entire list of all the games Bandai Namco has done for Nintendo, but they've done a lot in the Switch era. And they also port a lot of their anime games and fighting games over as well. So like Bandai Namco supports Nintendo pretty strongly. They might even be like their best like partner. I think it's definitely a debate to be had.
The new Ubisoft.
Yeah, Ubisoft's kind of not really
just left Nintendo completely. They were like, "Screw you, Wii U sucked. We got screwed hard. We're leaving now."
Yeah, so I'm trying to look at what Bandai Namco has had a hand in. Apparently, Bandai Namco helped with ARMS, which is interesting.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean, Dragon Ball Xenoverse, One Piece. I mean, I'm just gonna focus on Nintendo stuff. Pokken Tournament they helped out with. Dark Souls Remastered, which again is not like a Nintendo thing, but it's just like a really cool thing that got to come to Switch. Looking through the list here. There's a lot of games. Not new Pokemon Snap, as I said earlier. Pac-Man 99.
Right.
They didn't mention Smash Brothers, which is weird.
Right, you think that would be like the big one.
What? Why wouldn't they do that? Maybe I just missed it? Could I have missed it?
They helped us with Mario Kart 8? I didn't know that.
I'm now debating the legitimacy of this list. You know what?
What are you on?
No, they did mention Smash Brothers. It was there. I'm looking at this Nintendo fan website just to sort of
compile I think I'm looking at the same one you're looking at.
They helped with Mario Kart?
Kind of like Flame Heart.
Are you serious? I know they help. They
Yes,
help with.
Mario
They
Kart
help
8,
with the
yeah.
Mario Kart arcade games. I don't know if
Apparently they helped work on Mario Kart 8.
Mario.
I didn't know that.
They help with Mario Sports Superstars. Anyways, it's the I did not know they. I guess they co-developed back on the Wii U, not the Switch version. Okay, that's very interesting. Looking at the Wii U,
the Wii
what they
version.
did for that's what I was where I was confused. That's why I didn't see it. The Tank game, a Wii Sports Club. I mean, they clearly Nintendo trusts Bandai Namco. Like, they've co-developed some of their biggest games. So yeah, like I don't think they have a good track record. Like, any game Bandai Namco has worked on that's been like a Nintendo product has been pretty good. I can't think of a bad one. So I'm not really concerned. Now there is that rumor that is widely believed that Bandai Namco was helping Nintendo to make Metroid Prime 4, but they had to restart and then with Retro Studios. They didn't release though, so I wouldn't think that means Bandai Namco is not going to do a good job. Like, I don't think that. Not to mention, this is a remake or a remaster, so the blueprint's already there.
Yeah.
It's hard to, it's possible, but if you already have a remake, you kind of already know what the game is what it is. You're just kind of modernizing it, sprucing it up, making it better, usually from just a visual perspective and an audio perspective, potentially more. So I'm not worried from a quality point here. I think they're going to do a good job. But what would they do? Right?
That's the thing. Like, I'm looking at their games. 3D action adventure is what it is, right?
3D action is what I've seen. I don't know why people have been also saying adventure. Maybe it's just a translate. The translations I saw said 3D action, which
I think a lot of people just hear action and think action adventure and probably just say it.
Maybe. I might have just missed it.
That's literally what I just did. I heard you say action earlier, and I was like, action adventure.
No, I mean, it could. The other thing is that this terminology can be a little vague. Like, an action game can be construed as an adventure game or vice versa, right? Breath of the Wild has fighting in it. That's an action game. You could say that. Let's see.
Yeah.
Kid Icarus has action in it and adventuring. That could be an action adventure. Mario, you stomp on things. That's action-ish, right? So like it's tough to like say. Metroid Dread, for example. I think typically when we talk about Metroid games, we don't say, "Oh, this is an action game." We talk about it as an exploration game, right? But Metroid Dread won Best Action Game at the Game Awards.
Right, yeah.
Last time, so there is definitely like a bit of a blurred lines territory there. So
yeah,
that does kind of leave it as a fairly broad.
There's too many things to like try to guess what exactly they're working on. I think so. Maybe we should try to think of like the type of project. Like, is this gonna be something from their library of games? Is this going to be a Nintendo game?
I'm inclined to think it's Nintendo, because why would Nintendo hire Bandai Namco to make a remake?
Right. A lot of people have been saying that.
Yeah.
But Nintendo also could just be like sponsoring an idea that they had for something that came out of a previous Nintendo console, but it was also made by Bandai Namco. I don't know. Like there are options for things that aren't technically Nintendo IPs. But I do think that's the most likely thing, is that it'd be something Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, what if like they want to just publish like Tekken Tag Tournament again?
Yeah.
Like
they could be remaking an old Tekken game, but
that doesn't seem likely, right? Like, I think
they probably also would have called it a fighting game, not an action game.
Sure,
but
yeah, I think what makes the most sense is that it's an action game, like an actual legit action game. Now, what would fall under the category of action, right? Even though it is a bit of a broad term, there's a couple franchises, in my opinion, that fit pretty cleanly under the action category. There are two, actually, that I have in mind that are very good fits: Kid Icarus and Star Fox.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually,
Star Fox is an interesting one because that series is definitely in a weird state. But I'm gonna say something like remake for Star Fox. Is that what the series needs right now? I don't think it does.
it's been that, and that's where I fall as well, Brandon. I am a bit skeptical of that because, like, why would you like it? Star Fox, the original, and Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Zero are just all retellings of the basic same story. You want to do it again? Also, there is already another remake of Star Fox 64 called Star Fox 64 3D. So the game has been reimagined and repurposed several times. There is Star Fox Command that is very divergent. There is also Star Fox Assault, and there is Star Fox Adventures. All of those, I would say, are really cool games.
Games that are just remakes of the original Star Fox than there are new Star Fox games.
Yeah, so
Ridiculous.
I'm a little skeptical of them doing a remake of using the Star Fox brand.
If they did, then it would definitely have to be Assault or Adventure.
Because Bandai Namco
Command is generally seen as a pretty bad game, and
you don't remake
obviously
bad
the other
games.
versions are just the same.
You usually don't.
Yeah.
You pretty much most of the
Unless
time you
you're
don't
gonna
remake.
completely reimagine them, but I don't think. Like,
if it's a bad
sometimes
game, you're just
there
gonna make a
can
new
be-
one.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Or
like
remake
Kid
another
Icarus.
one. Yeah. I agree. I think it's gotta be a remake of something that was fairly popular and successful, respective to its system, and
Yeah.
I think that does kind of. I don't like if we look at the Star Fox games, like, were any of them really super successful?
No.
Now, I'm not okay. Super successful is a bit of a
Successful
stretch.
enough, but
Like, yeah, like they don't have to be like 20 million selling games, right? Like, if it sold 1 million copies, I think that would be justify a remake for sure. You know, but if the game was considered a failure for its respective system, then I don't think they're gonna remake it. I think it has to be something that has like a following that's gonna be happy that's getting remade. Like, it's kind of like that's kind of like the big point of a remake, right? It's like it gets people excited
play up
because
the nostalgia.
right. And at the same time, yes, you want to bring a new fan base there, but you need kind of like that initial fan base as well. That's the whole point of a remake. So a lot of people have been suggesting maybe Star Fox Assault because Bandai Namco actually produced Star Fox Assault.
Oh,
yeah.
I know that. Well, that makes it a lot more likely.
And I'll also say I think Bandai Namco has shown a pretty decent propensity for making solid multiplayer games that have online functionality. Look at Pokken Tournament. Look at Smash Brothers. Yeah, there's that lag issue, but point is, could they remake Star Fox Assault and flesh out the multiplayer a bit more and have it have online play? I think that's actually a pretty cool concept that they could do a very good job of.
I think there's a lot of work that they could do. I think if they did remake Star Fox Assault, it would be more like a slight reimagining of the game. Because I think there's a lot of issues that people have with that game, specifically with the on-ground sections, that they could vastly improve. Because I agree, the on-ground sections are just tedious and not that fun.
They could perhaps be repurposed. Now,
But I think there's potential to make a really great Star Fox game out of Assault, though, or a remake of it.
Now, some people have suggested maybe like Donkey Kong 64. That'd be cool. I'd love to see that happen, but at the same time, this kind of goes
with
back
Rare on certain
I think
elements.
that's part of the complication there, the Rare element. But then also
same thing with Star Fox Adventure, because I think they own the rights to a lot of the characters in that game.
that may also pose a potential problem. So Star Fox Assault definitely seems more likely of all the Star Fox games to be remade. But then with the Donkey Kong situation, you're not gonna. It's a 3D action game, so it's not gonna be any of the side-scrolling Donkey Kong games. So the only option is Donkey Kong 64 if it's gonna be Donkey Kong. And the issue with Donkey Kong 64 is that I think there's less of a chance of them remaking a Nintendo 64 game because of how much older it is. That requires a much more significant effort to modernize it, first off. But then secondly, to your point, it does have that rare element. I'm not sure how much of a complication that creates. But then the
Technically, I mean, if they're remaking it from the ground up, other than the fact that you need to redesign the levels to look modern and to work with like a modern,
you can't carry over any assets.
It's not really right. But if you're remaking it, likely you're not going to be doing that anyways. But depending on how, if it's a remaster, yeah, it's going to be a lot more work.
Oh, by the way, like we don't. Yeah, that's the other thing though. It's like the terminology there is definitely blurred, right? Like I would assume there's gonna be more of an effort similar to Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition.
Right. I think that is probably the most likely.
So I don't expect them to completely rebuild Donkey Kong 64. Not to mention there's another
third parties do that for their remakes. They just completely remake the entire thing in a whole new engine.
But there's another key issue here for Donkey Kong 64. It's not considered a good game.
It depends on who you ask. I think it's considered a flawed game, but I do think it's good.
If Nintendo's gonna re-release this game, right? Beyond just like as an eShop thing or a Nintendo Switch Online thing, like if they're gonna remake it, I think they need to have some fundamental gameplay changes. Yeah. So in other words, the point I'm trying to make is I don't see Nintendo greenlighting this project. I just don't. I think it's unlikely. Like, could it be done? I think
there's too much work.
Yeah. It's not that it can't be done, because I do agree with you.
They need to fundamentally rethink how the game works, because people are not gonna be open to a remake of a collectathon that works the exact same way. Like, they're not gonna want to go and collect every single different type of banana in all the levels in order to beat the game. Like, it's not gonna work these days. It barely worked when it came out, when collectathons were actually a thing still.
Yeah. Looking here at the chat real quick for some ideas. All see Brosex added me and said, "What are the chances it could be Ocarina of Time HD?" And he did also mention later down the chat that they already did Ocarina of Time 3D. Right. So, and that is another valid consideration. Like, Nintendo could remake a Zelda game, right? Well, the issue with them doing Zelda is because, they already have a dedicated sort of Zelda remake studio in Grezzo. So I just don't see that happening by Bandai Namco. Could there be another Zelda remake? Sure, but not by Bandai Namco. So there's that.
There's
not to mention
another remake that's not made by Grezzo. But
I was just gonna say that, like, again, they could. You could call a Zelda game an action game, but I feel like if it's a job listing, I just think it decreases the chances of it being a Zelda game. I think like it would be adventure game. You know, it could be an action game. I just feel like it doesn't necessarily fall too well under the action category as well as, say, Star Fox or Kid Icarus. So Zelda's unlikely, especially because of the Grezzo thing. They already have a Grezzo developer. One series that could be fall under the action category though would be Metroid. Metroid Dread did win Best Action Game, so why can't it be a Metroid remake, right? But with that, Nintendo already has two different studios working on Metroid. Yeah. They have Mercury Steam and Retro Studios. Retro Studios being wholly owned by Nintendo, but we know they're working on Metroid Prime 4, and rumor has it that the Metroid Prime remake has also been done by Retro Studios. So the odds of Nintendo hiring Bandai Namco to do a 3D action game is unlikely, unless maybe they want to also remaster Prime 2 and 3, and they just want to sort of hand those off as to be kind of quicker, simpler efforts. Maybe. And actually, you know, I'll also say if they need to do some minor reworkings, maybe they're also going to hand off Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD to another studio as well. But, you know, I'll tell you this. Bandai Namco is a big studio, right? I don't think Nintendo would hand off simple remaster port situations to Bandai Namco. I think this is suggestive of something more major. Like if it was something more on the subtle side, they would use a smaller studio. They wouldn't use a massive one like Bandai Namco. Like yeah, I just don't. I think this is going to be something that's a little bit more significant. So I don't see it being Metroid because they already have multiple Metroid developers kind of at the ready. There's already multiple Metroid projects at the ready. And with Zelda, they already have the dedicated Zelda team and they have the dedicated Zelda remake team. It's not dedicated, but they've remade several Zeldas already. And they already supposedly have Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD kind of ready, and Breath of the Wild 2 is around the corner. I don't think they're going to be hiring Bandai Namco to make a Zelda project. So I don't think it's Metroid. I don't think it's Zelda. Star Fox is a possibility. It's a good one. Star Fox Assault is kind of like the best option there. Going back to Donkey Kong 64, because of the quality issue of the game and the rare element, I think is possible, but unlikely.
Also wouldn't call that an action game. I call it a 3D platformer adventure.
It's more of a platformer, right? Could you call it action and it not be... It's just
There's
a little...
very minor action in the game at points, but most of the game is not focused around any sort of action at all.
Yeah, so I think probably not. Now, Rel does ask, how about Mario Sluggers? Well, Mario Sluggers is a sports game.
Sports game, yeah. Definitely not an action game.
I think if they remade Mario Sluggers, if that's the project, then you're using action very, 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 very loosely.
Technically, I did an action.
Yeah.
So, it's an action game. Like, I don't think that's how it works.
No. Star Fox Assault, I think, is a pretty good option. But we haven't talked about Kid Icarus yet. Kid Icarus Uprising has actually been a game. Like, of all the games we discussed, the one game that we have that has now entered this conversation that people have actually been asking persistently to be redone or brought to Switch in some way is Kid Icarus Uprising. People haven't been begging for Donkey Kong 64 to be remade. People have not been begging for Star Fox Assault to be remade. Yes, there's been demands for Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD, but they were already remade. They are ready. There's no issues there, right? And again, we already covered the Zelda point. So what Nintendo game that is an action game that is like really wanted by a fairly large audience to be remade? Kid Icarus Uprising. So I think it's a game that makes sense. It's a high quality game
because Sakurai can work with them. Like he's worked with them on Smash.
Correct.
He could help oversee the project. Really
Absolutely,
because he's used to working with those guys.
Absolutely, and he's already done with Smash Brothers. It's been a little bit. He doesn't have to have a huge active role. It is a remake. They already have, to your point, they already have experience working with Sakurai on both Smash games, and if you've played Kid Icarus and you've played like Kirby Air Ride, if you play the Smash games, you'll notice that there is a similarity with all the games and how they organize the menus and stuff. There's kind of like that Sakurai spirit, and I think Bandai Namco would be perfectly suited to matching that because they've been working on Smash for a decade already. So yes, that's another point, huge point for maybe being Kid Icarus Uprising. Huge demand.
Getting me hyped about that idea, actually.
Huge demand for it to be remade. It's one of the few like Nintendo games that people have been persistently asking to be remade. Right? It is very clear cut 3D action. Like of all the Nintendo games, it's very cleanly falls under that sort of genre, and we're not like sort of like bending definitions here.
It is very little exploring.
It's more of an action game than Metroid Dread.
Fighting,
It's more of an action game than Metroid Dread. And it's a game that's considered high quality. It does have issues though. There were a lot of noted issues with the control options for Kid Icarus Uprising. Because you couldn't have a second analog slider, it was very uncomfortable to control the game with a touchscreen for a lot of people. And they actually brought out the boat, and it was very beneficial for for a few games on 3DS. But also, I think the game even launched with like a stand, so you can kind of hold it in a way that would make it more comfortable. That's how much of an issue it was. So Kid Icarus Uprising is also a game that's really good, but would benefit greatly by being on a more traditional control setup sort of system. So it benefits greatly. There's a huge demand for it. It falls clearly under that definition. There's a comfort level because Bandai Namco has worked with Sakurai for over a decade already. So all those kind of bode well for it maybe being Kid Icarus Uprising. That's my vote, just for the record. Like that's if I had to bet, this is a one. Now there's so many options, so it may not be that one. But it's a game that I think Nintendo would actually be willing to green light because it was pretty successful on 3DS, and it's something that could be really successful on Switch. I see it being the kind of project that would actually work, like kind of like from every front.
Yeah, I think it would actually sell really well, like, 5 million or plus. Like you could pull some numbers on the Switch with a remake. Especially because I think there's just a lot of hype around just that idea in general.
I could see it outperforming Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition.
Oh, it will 100%. If they both release, I think it's just that type of game would do better than any RPG. But yeah, I mean, I would love it. I haven't gotten a chance to actually play it, but I've seen the whole game.
It's a game that's very beautiful for 3DS. So if you remake something like that, that's another thing to consider actually, right? Like if you want to remake something, kind of like the big idea behind it is to make it sort of like visually, like substantially better. And I think a big element of it is making it aesthetically pleasing, right? So if you have a game that's very pretty for 3DS, then it kind of is like, okay, well, let's remake it for Switch so it looks that much better, right?
Yeah.
Now, to play devil's advocate, though, there's also Miitopia. They remade that, and that wasn't necessarily like a looker for 3DS. They just did. So, hard to say.
That was a strange choice.
Yeah.
I feel like there were other, like Tomodachi Life would have been a much better pick for that.
Having Hope 5, you may not be a Kid Icarus fan now, but when they release this remake, you will be. Maybe.
There you go. Maybe so.
We don't know what it's going to be.
Like, I would love it to get remade, because some people have been suggesting, like, a remaster, and I get that the game looks great for 3DS, but if you look at the game in HD, a lot of the actual assets are just, like, 2D billboards and, like, very, very low quality textures and just like flat planes, and it doesn't look good.
If it's a remaster, I mean,
definitely need to be what it needs.
Nintendo may still call it a remaster. The job listings do say remaster, by the way.
Oh, okay.
But
they're gonna have to.
Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is also called a remaster by Nintendo.
Yeah. I think they would need more work than what they put into Xenoblade Chronicles Remaster in order to get the game to look good. Because I'm telling you, like literally, like. Most of the assets would not work on a large screen. They're just not meant to look good on anything but a very, very tiny, very low resolution screen. It's not like not Metroid Dread, but what was the one before that? Samus Returns. It's not like that game. That game looks excellent if you scale it up in HD. Kid Icarus Uprising most of the time does not. The game needs a full remake or a heck of a lot of remastering efforts.
Maybe. Then actually, I mean, that is actually a valid consideration, right? Like, I was wondering, like, are there any like cons? Like, is there any like arguments to be made against this game being the one? And I think you just made it. This game might be harder to modernize than some other games.
You're gonna basically have to throw out all of the original assets and use new ones.
And I did in the video I posted. There are some people talking about potential like voice acting, and maybe they would have to change around some of the actors as well.
Would they?
I mean, can you just reuse the original audio, or would you want to redo the voices?
You could just. I don't see why you would redo the voices unless you're gonna add new lines. You could just. You already have the animation data for the lip syncing and stuff, and if you don't, you can just make new animations. I don't see an issue that I can think of, but also, again, disclaimer, not a professional voice actor, so I don't know. But I wouldn't see why not. Can you think of a reason they might not be able to do that?
I mean, some of the voice actors were different in Smash, I think. But they also
had new lines.
They had new lines, right? So I don't know. I feel like it's totally possible, but I just guess I wonder, do they have like good quality audio? But I guess
I assume they do.
Yeah, I mean, but Kid Icarus Uprising was made by Sora,
like an ancient
not by
system.
Nintendo though. So I don't know. I mean, Nintendo does own the rights to Kid Icarus though, so would they also have the rights to the assets or the voice, the audio?
I don't know. Isn't Sora Ltd? Who owns that? Is that run by Sakurai?
Yeah.
Okay. I assume he has all the original assets for pretty much
I don't know.
everything he made.
I feel like
I think that's just kind of a...
You could just call it a joint
thing.
effort then, right? Like maybe Sora and Sakurai get a cut of the pie, and then that's what they do so they can have the voices. I don't think it's a hurdle. I don't think it's a hurdle that can't be surmounted. Like yeah.
I mean, with all the copyright stuff they get around and Smash,
be ironic otherwise. Yeah. So, Kid Icarus is still my vote for most likely, but Star Fox Assault is also a pretty good option. I do feel like now I think it's good that you brought up the on foot elements because that is kind of widely criticized. How they would sort of redo that, I don't know if they even need to. Kid Icarus Uprising should just be it. I think it's a better game. It's a better game. Like that, I think that would be the best game to remake of the ones we've discussed. Is there any other game, guys in the chat, that you would like to be remade that you think would be a good fit that would fall under the 3D action category that is a Nintendo game that Bandai Namco could do a good job of? If you got any ideas, let me know in the comments or in the chat. I'm having a hard time thinking of another one that's like straight up Nintendo. Eternal
say,
Darkness, I think I've seen people bring up. That's like horror though, so
yeah, I wouldn't have called that an action game. But do you think it's harder to, just hypothetically,
Battalion Wars maybe
remake
it's real-time strategy,
Kid Icarus Uprising fully from the ground up, or do you think it's harder to develop new segments for Star Fox and then remaster that game because you don't need to remake all the assets for that?
I mean, if you're talking about just building entirely new on foot segments, I think no. That I don't think you do that. And also when we say remake, I even though I know you say it's harder, I feel like I don't know. I was to go back and look at the visuals, but I did look at a trailer the other day. I mean, I thought it looked pretty good. Just like they would have to update a lot of the models.
Star Fox Assault?
No, Kid Icarus. Like
which game? Oh,
Kid Icarus. Like you just have to modernize the visuals. You just have to modernize the game. You don't have to change the game. Like obviously you have
that's what I'm saying.
Like the touchscreen controls would be mapped to the second analog stick as they do. Like that's it, right? Like that would just make the game better. I don't think there's any like significant gameplay changes that need to be done. You just have to make the game run modernly from a visual and audio perspective. And that's like I don't even want them to add content to the game. I don't think they need to. You just remake it as is. Star Fox Assault, I think you make a good argument, would need some actual changes. Like Kid Icarus Uprising has an online mode already, first off, right? Star Fox Assault doesn't. Like they would have to actually like sort of gear it for online play. And then the on foot missions would I think you maybe just keep them the same if you're gonna remake it. But to your point, if you want it to be a high quality product, maybe you do rework them. But again, I think that from a gameplay perspective, they're reworking a lot more. Kid Icarus Uprising does not need to be reworked at all from a gameplay point of view. It's just visuals. So.
Yeah, and I think that's easier of a project because you can just work on it instead of having a lot of the work being concepts and just like level design and stuff. Like if you're just going into a project full tilt, just designing like objects and things, it's way quicker than having to go and be like, okay, what's actually fun? Let's test this.
There's not, that's actual like rethinking the game. So no, Yeah, and then I don't think Nintendo would want. I don't know. I think more likely. If we're gonna argue Kid Icarus Uprising versus Star Fox Assault, I say Kid Icarus Uprising. Actually, I'm gonna put that poll in the chat. What do you guys think is more likely?
Yeah, there you go. I would also say Kid Icarus. Although, I mean, the only argument against Kid Icarus being more likely is just that there's been more Star Fox games than Kid Icarus games, but
some people will argue that it's more likely because Bandai Namco has made Star Fox Assault. So, I mean,
that's a fair point.
But also, who's begging for Star Fox Assault to be remade or on Switch?
Right.
Like, I don't think there's a demand for Star Fox Assault to come to Switch. It's just kind of like we want a new Star Fox game for Switch. We're not talking about any remakes for Star Fox. We are talking about
at this point the Star Fox brand needs a big change. It needs something to revitalize and revolutionize the series in a completely new direction. It doesn't need a remake of a moderately successful game from the GameCube era.
Oh.
But if there was one, I mean, I'd play it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would. See what the polls. Right now, Star Fox Assault is winning. I am shocked.
I can see people
I'm not
being
shocked.
hesitant about saying anything about Kid Icarus Uprising, because at this point, it's almost like the second Mother 3.
Yeah. But let's move on here while the poll goes on. You guys should be voting Kid Icarus Uprising. I'm campaigning for it.
We want Kid
just
Icarus
give me your opinion. Yeah, that's the point of the poll. I'm curious what you guys think.
The poll wasn't which one you guys want. It's which one you guys think.
Either way, the answer should be Kid Icarus Uprising.
Yeah.
It's a better game.
And either way, it should be what I think.
Exactly. We're joking. Yeah, but yes, Elemental Hero, we did talk about Zelda earlier. So yeah, that's at the beginning of the podcast. But let's jump into the final topic. So, Nintendo Switch Online, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance emulators have supposedly been leaked. Now, this is exciting stuff if true, right? There are some games mentioned, like, for example, Minish Cap. I would love to have Minish Cap on my Switch. I would love to have Minish Cap on my Switch. Absolutely.
100% of that game back on my DS Lite, playing in backwards compatibility mode.
Yeah. Now, I'm not 100% in belief that it is a valid leak, because these things can be faked, and there's been rumors for it for a long time already. So perhaps because there have been rumors, someone came up with it and is in an effort to fool people, right? Now, there is like a visual thing that shows like easy flash, and apparently Nintendo had some sort of lawsuit against that and won. So maybe it's the case that it's like within it, so it makes people think that why would Nintendo have that there? So that is something to consider. Now, again, this is like stuff that's not like officially published thing, so there's a number of elements that could be in or out of something like that. So that's just something to consider. Like, I remember there was there was like this whole lawsuit thing where a lot of files came out for Microsoft, and like Fortnite stuff actually. And there was this concept art that came out for Samus in Fortnite.
That was Epic and Apple lawsuit, right?
Right, you're right. Epic and Apple, correct. But a number of things came from that, like Master Chief, for example, which is a Microsoft thing, and a lot of things came to fruition. A lot of things were proven true from that. But one of them also includes Samus in Fortnite, which has not happened and it doesn't look to be happening. But it had an art there.
At one point, apparently, it was gonna.
Right, they were talking about it. That's what it suggested. There were some discussions had there. And there was a piece of art there that looked incredible. I was like, oh man, it's just like how they are currently designing Samus. And keep in mind, at the time, we didn't have Metroid Dread. We didn't know how it looked. We didn't know what they were sort of thinking for the future of Metroid. And people were getting excited. I was excited. But as it turned out, that image was just something that had been on Google for years. So this internal discussion, this art, they had just taken it from Google. Point is, I'm not saying it's the exact same thing. You know, it could have been just like the marketing department talking with Nintendo and nothing actually came to be versus like actual development. Like those are two different like sort of worlds. But sometimes you do reuse like imagery or assets or different things that aren't necessarily like 100% yours. We've seen that before. Like even if you go to like some like old Nintendo games, like they like for like Ocarina of Time, like it does use like imagery from like landmarks in the real world, and it's just sort of repurposed and layered over. I mean, it happens all the time. So I don't know. I don't know what the Easy Flash thing is. I'm just trying to like maybe extrapolate how it might still be a legit leak. Regardless, I do think eventually there will be Game Boy games added to Nintendo Online.
I think next September. It seems to me that they're gonna need something after Mario Kart, which I think is gonna end sometime around then. And they have been comfortable adding new systems every like 2 years or so. So it will be 2 years next September since N64. So I don't see why we couldn't get them. And I don't think that, well, I don't think they should just like, we're launching just Game Boy. You'll get Game Boy Color later. And now you have Game Boy Color. You'll get Game Boy Advance later. I think they should all come at once. I don't think people are going to be excited for just Game Boy games. You know?
Yeah, I think adding all three would be great. Now, you know, before when these rumors first were a thing,
what most people actually care about.
Right. But I've heard some speculation that maybe if it happens, Game Boy, Game Boy Color come to Nintendo Online, Game Boy Advance comes to Nintendo Online expansion.
I could see that for sure.
It's
honestly,
compelling.
That wouldn't be... I don't think that'd be a bad thing to happen. I think it'd be fine. Add more value to the expansion pack, so a lot of people don't think there's enough value there.
And I could see it next September, like as you said, because by that point they're coming out with basically an N64 game per month, and I don't think they're going to stop putting out N64 games, but I think it will slow down maybe, and maybe they mix it up by having Game Boy Advance games coming out in between.
We'll get an
games.
N64 game every 6 months, like we're getting with the Super NES and NES. We're getting like every couple months at most.
Yeah, but I could see Game Boy Advance, like maybe it's not just one game a month, right? Maybe it's a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so, because they're smaller titles.
Right. So adding that content a year in would help to bolster Nintendo Online expansion. And that's kind of like a big thing there, right? Like because of how much more expensive Nintendo Online expansion is, they need to be continually thinking about content that they can add to that to keep us subscribed. So that's something that they have more reason to do. The Game Boy Color stuff. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that maybe that doesn't even come to the base pack, and maybe it's all just Game Boy NSO Online expansion. I don't want it to be, because I think that would piss off some people. You know.
Yeah.
But maybe.
I do think they need to offer something for the base tier.
I guess you still want to add stuff there.
Now.
You still want to add stuff. Man, imagine Tetris.
Also, I want to say, I
think I
might have accidentally said next September and playing this year. I meant 2023.
Oh,
to be clear.
Okay, you think we'll have to wait that much that long from now?
I think that they have Mario Kart right now, and that they're good, and they'll wait. I also think they just added N64 last year, and they usually wait another extra year.
Yeah, they usually don't add a whole other platform a year later. But yeah. I guess I was just kind of thinking, well, I mean, maybe they do add it a year later.
Maybe, but I would argue it's more likely that they'll wait, because, like I said, I think Mario Kart DLC will be done around September or October of next year. So announcing that it's coming in November or December, in September would be good.
I don't know. To be totally frank with you, I'm not sure if this emulator is real. Right.
Right. Yeah.
If it is real,
looked into it enough to know.
If it is real, then I think this September makes more sense. But again, just because it's ready doesn't mean they're about to do it. Like I said earlier, I was just trying to kind of make the argument that because there's not that many N64 games, maybe they would want to bring out Gameboy Advance sooner so they can kind of spread it out a bit more.
Maybe. I think there's enough that they can wait till next September.
I think there is, but I think if they wait till next September with a game a month, they will have almost run dry.
Yeah.
And I think the point is that if you space it out, you can rely on Game Boy Advance and N64 until a few years into the next generation, where maybe they decide to add GameCube.
Yeah.
And actually, I kind of like this theory, because if that's the case, right, that they move on to GameCube eventually after the Game Boy emulators, that by that point will be on new hardware, and that new hardware will have analog triggers as a default, which all of a sudden makes it pretty easy to add GameCube, right? Because without analog triggers to add GameCube to some sort of virtual console eShop offering, you have to rethink the controls a little bit. Not impossible. Yeah. It just requires more work and thinking.
Requires work per title.
Correct. Yeah. So I think it makes more sense to expect GameCube emulation on the next Nintendo system, assuming that the system has default analog triggers.
They literally could just release, and they're 100% going to do this as well, even if they do also have analog triggers for the
have a GameCube controller. Yep. Yeah, good
all
point.
GameCube controllers.
Good point.
Wireless GameCube controllers.
Good point. I mean, if they really wanted it to be on Switch, they could even come up with just a thing with you have to press these two shoulder buttons to use the deep sort of trigger thing. It's just
they have the other shoulder button could just be for the other press.
It would just be awkward though.
Yeah, it'd be kind of strange.
Yeah. And how
it wouldn't be as intuitive.
Absolutely. I mean, people already argue that N64 controls are not intuitive already on the Switch Online.
But to be fair, if they come up with a Pro Controller with analog, I don't think they'll do the second button press thing. I think they would just do normal analog, so it would be weird anyways on that controller, because the second click you have to kind of more muscle memory it, just kind of figure out where the threshold is.
What if they do design it like that though? What if they do have the second click? I mean, the GameCube shoulder buttons is analog.
Yeah.
It is analog. It's not there are varying degrees. It's not just 1, 2.
It's an analog, and it has the second click. But I just don't think that modern developers will want to design games around that.
Just thinking more about it. I don't know if it's click click. I don't think it is click click. I think it's just press and then click.
Right.
It's just
it is.
So I don't think it'd be...
I didn't mean to say that there was a second click.
But I guess the point is that if you play for example with an Xbox, there is no click. It's just gradual press.
It's just smooth. Yeah.
Right. I actually like the click. So maybe it just has a click.
I think the click's good if you design games with the click. I just think nobody's going to use it. I think that if they did it, it would be the IR sensor and the Joy-Con. It'd be used for a couple things Nintendo wants to do, and then that's it.
But have you ever played a game? I don't know. I've played Mario Sunshine with a PlayStation controller, and it's not that much of a problem. It's better than having to press 2 different buttons to do it. Is my point.
I have tried to do it also like on an Xbox, and I didn't like it.
Yeah. I mean, now I'm curious. How do they handle Mario Sunshine? I played the game. I don't remember what they did for Mario Sunshine on the Mario 35th Anniversary Collection.
I didn't check that one out.
I played the game. I beat it. I'm just trying to remember what they did. I think it was just 2 different like button options.
I think it might have been like one of the other button options was like LR, and then like the smaller button.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to go back and play it now, but it's
ZR now.
Yeah, and that game was a more dedicated remaster, right? Which would be more than you should expect for NSO. So, but yeah, so I do think Game Boy emulation is coming. I'm not committed to the idea that these emulators are 100% real, because that whole Easy Flash thing, and even if there wasn't anything 100%. Even if that wasn't there, I'm still not 100% committed, because you don't know until it's a thing.
Yeah.
But some people are fairly convinced it may be. But even if it is, let's assume it is. It's not happening. They're not announcing it next month. Like, earliest they announce it, I mean, the absolute earliest, and this would be completely unexpected, would be this June. But they don't really announce those kinds of things in June. They usually save them for September. So
yeah, September, yeah.
The more likely scenario that still may not be the case is that we'll have to wait until September. And to Brandon's point, maybe it's not even this year. Maybe it's next year, because we're not at this point. We're not even a year removed. By September, we'll be a year removed from the N64 being added. So I could see us waiting even longer. It could be next year that they add the emulators.
I honestly think that's more likely, just because they would follow their pattern. I don't think they would release three whole new systems essentially a year out from N64.
And then in 2025, GameCube emulation on Switch 2.
Let's go.
Yeah. And then by 2027, we're like, all right, time to emulate Wii. Which, by the way, if they still stick with Joy-Cons, totally can do. So,
yeah, easy.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I could just check with the chat real quick, see if there's anything else to be sort of said here. The Triple J Zoo, I'm the one who put out the tweet that made everyone think we're going to get a Xenoblade Chronicles 3 trailer tomorrow. I just want to say sorry in advance just in case. If we get a Xenoblade Chronicles 3 trailer tomorrow, that would be amazing.
I didn't even see that. That would be dope. I didn't even see the tweet they're talking about.
There's logic behind the theory, you say.
Which
theory? About there being a Xenoblade Chronicles 3 trailer.
Put a... Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes
they're just having a conversation. I'm reading it out.
Context.
Yeah. I will say, it's kind of late. There hasn't been too many people who have voted. We only have 19 votes right now in the poll.
Pathetic.
But as the numbers have gotten larger, the gap between Kid Icarus Uprising and Star Fox Assault has diminished. But as things stand right now, at only 19 votes, which is a little low. Normally we have more votes. Kid Icarus Uprising is at 42%, with Star Fox Assault being at 58. It was 33 to 67 earlier. So I have a theory that the gap will diminish with more votes. And actually, we got an additional vote there. It's now 45-55. So
there you go. But to be fair, we're also biasing the results by saying that we want Kid Icarus, and we're telling you to eat the results right now.
Totally, yeah. It's totally not necessarily a fair vote. Maybe I'll put it out on the YouTube page, on my community page, and just kind of
put a Twitter poll up too.
Yeah,
and you can put one up on. You can put them up all over the place.
And that could be a whole other discussion, actually. Huh. Anyway, yeah, I think we've pretty much reached the end. I'm going to end the poll for now. Kid Icarus will lose, officially, but there will be another round. You haven't seen the end yet. And it doesn't matter who wins, because at the end of the day, the real winner is going to be whatever game's being remade by Bandai Namco. So,
which is going to be a mysterious third game we have not even talked about.
Probably, actually. Kid Icarus Uprising just makes a lot of sense. a lot of sense. But
And when does Nintendo do things that make sense, Andres?
I mean, they're giving us Xenoblade Chronicles 3, that makes sense. They're giving us Splatoon 3, that makes sense. They're giving us Breath of the Wild 2, that makes sense.
Ah, shut up. Stop being illogical.
Yeah. I think they do a lot of things that make sense.
But they also do equally a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense.
You're right. Like, why then in the world did they show us a trailer for Breath of the Wild 2 back at E3 2019? I remember where we were at mentally. At that before they revealed Breath of the Wild 2, you and I both were like, oh, we're not going to see the next Zelda for like 3-4 years at least, right?
Yep.
Like,
it's only 2 years since 2017.
Right,
we won't see it this year for sure.
We weren't expecting to see it until around now.
Yeah.
Which, interestingly, is how it's actually shaking out. But Nintendo decided to just reveal that thing way, way, way too early, which was a weird thing. It was an exciting thing. But
the craziest thing is they specifically said that at the beginning of the Switch's life, one of the biggest reasons that they were starting to do the whole like close announcements to release thing that they've been doing for most games throughout the Switch's life cycle. They said it was because Breath of the Wild got delayed so many times. They didn't want to keep talking about games and then delaying them like, Sony and Xbox were doing. I mean, they still a little bit, but way more back then, where they would just talk about a game like way before they barely even started working on it. And they were like, oh, we're not going to do that anymore because Breath of the Wild. And then the sequel to the game that caused you to change your whole philosophy has the same issue. It's baffling.
Indeed. Granted, there were other elements like COVID and all, so that should be considered.
Oh,
but
for sure.
Still. Anyways, guys, I think that's pretty much it for now. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Please leave a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. Maybe join as a member if you'd like to do that. But stay tuned. We'll see you really soon. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.